Hare Krishna. Welcome to our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. Before starting reading this great literature, let me offer my obeisances to His Divine Grace, Śrī Bhaktivedanta Swami, Śrīla Prabhupada, and obeisances to all my listeners. And I beg you, please shower your mercy on me and forgive all my imperfections, my shortcomings, and my broken English. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna pṛṣṭaḥ Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swami Chinamine Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pasachade Satarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabhanu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kantarada Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gorangira Devrindavaneshwari Vrishavanu Suchi Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Manchakalpatarubhasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 5, Vidura's Talks with Maitreya. Translation Purport by His Divine Grace, Śrī Bhaktivedanta Swami, Śrīla Prabhupada. Today's verse 17. Śrī Śukadeva sa evam bhagavān pṛṣṭaḥ kṣattrā kauṣāravo muniḥ puṁsāṁ niḥśreyasārthena bahu-mānayan. Śrī Śukadeva uvāca. Śrī Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, Saha, he, evam, thus, bhagavān, the great sage, pṛṣṭaḥ, being requested, kṣattrā, by Vidura, kauṣāravaḥ, Maitreya Muni, the great sage, puṁsāṁ, for all people, niḥśreyasa, for the greatest welfare, arthena, for that, tam, unto him, aha, narrated, bahu, greatly, mānayan, honoring. Translation. Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, the great sage Maitreya, after honoring Vidura very greatly, began to speak at Vidura's request for the greatest welfare of all people. Again the verse, Śukadeva Gosvāmī said, the great sage Maitreya Muni, after honoring Vidura very greatly, began to speak at Vidura's request for the greatest welfare of all people. Purport by Śrīla Prabhupada. The great sage Maitreya Muni is described here as bhagavān because he surpassed all ordinary human beings in learning and experience. So this is a verse spoken by Śukadeva Gosvāmī. He is describing the conversations of Vidura and Maitreya. Vidura talks with Maitreya. So Maitreya Muni was a great sadhu, a great philosopher, a great saint. Prabhupada describes him as being a mixed devotee of the Lord. he's not described as a pure devotee of the Lord, but as a mixed devotee of the Lord, because he had some tendency for the monastic philosophy. And a pure Vaishnava is completely absorbed in the form of Krishna, in the service, direct service to the personality of Godhead, Krishna. So therefore, Maitreya Muni, he had this attachment for the monastic view, the nature of God as his Brahma Jyoti, as his race, effulgent race. And Maitreya, it happened that he heard from Lord Krishna when Krishna was finishing his leelas in this manifested world. It is described that at Prabhasa kṣattrā, where Krishna annihilated all the members of his family, not Krishna personally, but by his all internal potency, he made in certain way that all his descendants were put in a big fight and they annihilated themselves. And at that moment when Krishna was by himself underneath a banyan tree at the bank of the Ganges river, so he was there, and Maitreya approached him as well as Uddhava, and Krishna imparted transcendental knowledge to both of them. So Maitreya Muni is described here in this verse as bhagavān. So Parashara Muni, he defines this word bhagavān as one who possesses all kinds of opulences. So the opulences of bhagavān, and Krishna is known as bhagavān, as in the Bhagavad Gita says, Śrī uvāca, the Supreme Personality of the Godhead said. Because bhagavān possesses all kinds of attributes and all qualities. Krishna, for example, is the most beautiful personality, is the most strong personality. So beauty, strength, knowledge, renunciation, so all these are qualifications of bhagavān. Maitreya is known as a bhagavān, is said here as being bhagavān because he possesses all qualities, but in a very minute form. So we cannot compare Bhagavān Sri Krishna as Bhagavān Maitreya. So it says that all living entities, they can reach 7 to 8% of the qualities of Lord Krishna. They cannot attain 100% of the qualities of Krishna. So Maitreya, he could attain many of the qualities of Lord Krishna, but he was still a minute living entity. But he possessed knowledge. He possessed so much knowledge that here he is giving instructions to Vidura. Vidura, who is the son of Vyasadeva. Vidura was the son of Vyasadeva by Vichitra Vidya's wives, Manika and Mandalika, if I'm not wrong. So he was begat by the maidservants of the queen, and he was born, Vidura was born. He was the son of Vyasadeva. So Maitreya Muni is a powerful personality, and he is qualified to give transcendental knowledge. So again, the great sage Maitreya Muni is described here as Bhagavan because he surpassed all ordinary human beings in learning and experience. Thus, his selection of the greatest welfare service for the world is considered authoritative. So what's the best or the greatest welfare service to the world? Because people, they want to be good. Many of them, those who are situated in goodness, or they are influenced by the mode of goodness, they want to do good for people. They open hospitals and charity houses and so many things. So this is all good, but what's the greatest welfare? The greatest welfare is like this Chinese proverb that it's better to teach a man to fish than to give a fish. So, to teach people in general of transcendence, to teach people about the real value of life, to teach people about our position as a spirit soul, our relationship with God. Actually, this is the greatest welfare. Because when we develop knowledge about ourselves and knowledge about the Supreme God, so then we are free from the material nature. We have not to accept bodies in this material world. We don't need, we will not accept any more bodies. Because the problem in this life, material life, that we are bound by birth, disease, old age, death. But one who knows himself and knows his relationship with God, that person doesn't have to take birth again in this material world. Krishna explains that in the Bhagavad-gīta. One who has attained my service doesn't have to take birth again in this material world. So the greatest welfare for all is to give transcendental knowledge. Because when you give to someone transcendental knowledge, that person, by realizing her constitutional position as a spirit soul, he doesn't have to take birth again in this material existence, but goes back home, back to Godhead. So the greatest service, welfare service for humanity is to give to others Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, he had a mission, and he imbibes in us this same mission of spreading, broadcasting Krishna consciousness as the greatest welfare for all living entities. So in following the mission of Prabhupada, we are even here trying to broadcast Śrīmad Bhagavatam, so someone can have the good fortune of hearing the transcendental message of Śrīmad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada says, the all-inclusive welfare service for the entire human society is devotional service to the Lord. And as requested by Vidura, the sage described the same very appropriately. So this is the greatest service, is to teach human society devotional service to the Lord. Because this is our constitutional position. We are parts of God. We are meant to serve Him. So our lives without serving God is nothing. It's like, for example, if you have a watch, and if the watch, there's those minuscule, those very small parts, so they do not, it's not worth anything. It's just a small part. But when that small part is connected with the watch, So it has a great value. So there's some way we, without God, we are nothing. We have no qualification at all. But when we are connected with God, so then we start to manifest our real qualities, So devotional service to the Lord is the greatest welfare. And here, at the request of Vidura, Maitreya, in this chapter of the Śrīmad Bhagavatān, chapter 5 of Śrīmad Bhagavatān, Maitreya starts to give instructions to Vidura. So the next verse, Maitreya uvāca sadhu pṛṣṭaḥ tvaya sadho lokan sadhu anugrinata kirtim vitam vata loke atmano duksajatmana. Maitreya uvāca. Shri Maitreya said, Sadhu, all good, pṛṣṭaḥ, I'm asked, tvaya, by you, sadhu, O good one, lokan, all the people, sadhu anugrinata, showing mercy in goodness, kirtim, glorious, vitamvata, broadcasting, loke, in the word, atmanaha, of the self, adoksaja, the transcendence, atmanaha, minds. Translation, Shri Maitreya said, O Vidura, all glory unto you. You have inquired from me of the greatest of all goodness, and thus you have shown your mercy both to the world and to me, because your mind is always absorbed in thoughts of the transcendence. So this was the kindness of Vidura, because we find in the pages of Śrīmad Bhagavatān and even in Bhagavad Gita that devotees, they put questions before the sages, before the Lord, although they many times they know the answer, but they put forward those questions in order for us, the common man, to get purified by hearing. Like in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord. He's self-realized, but he was put in ignorance, so he could ask relevant questions to Krishna. The same way here, Vidura, although he is quite knowledgeable, he was putting questions before Maitreya. So in order that ourselves, we are benefited by hearing the instructions of these great souls. So therefore, Maitreya Muni, in this chapter, he answers the questions of Vidura, because Vidura very kindly asked him. Prabhupada says in the Purport, Maitreya Muni, who was experienced in the science of transcendence, could understand that Vidura's mind was fully absorbed in transcendence. So of course, when Vidura approached Maitreya at the Hardwar, at the source of the Ganges River, so in that beautiful scenery, so Vidura approached Maitreya, and he asked questions of Maitreya, and Maitreya could see that Vidura was highly qualified in transcendental science. Vidura was not a common person, as I said, but Vidura was the son of Vyasadeva. He was in the royal family. He was half-brother of Dhritarashtra, Pandu. So a great personality and a great devotee of the Lord. So he left the palace because he didn't want to be involved with the intricacies politics of the palace. So he left the palace. He left the palace and traveled in all different pilgrimage sites in order to focus his mind, focus his thoughts on the Supreme Personality of the Godhead. So he was highly qualified, and he is approaching Maitreya, and Maitreya could see the qualifications of Vidura. Maitreya could see how advanced he was in spiritual life. So this verse, it uses the word adoxaja, because adoxaja, Prabhupada explains in the Purport, adoxaja means that which transcends the limits of sense perception or sensual experience. The Lord is transcendental to our sense experience, but he reveals himself to the sincere devotee. As in Bhagavad Gita says, that I do not, Krishna says to Arjuna, I do not manifest myself to the fools, to the less intelligence, for then I'm covered with my illusory energy. So Krishna doesn't manifest himself to our senses, because our senses are still mundane, material. When we use our senses in Krishna consciousness, when we dovetail our lives to God, to Krishna, then our senses become purified. And when our senses, they are purified, then we can observe, we can see, we can relate with adoxaja. Because adoxaja is the one who is beyond sense perception. We cannot perceive God. We cannot perceive God, only devotees. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, Saivayam Mayatejya Yoga Prokta Puratana Bhakto Sime Sakati Chira Hasan Hietadamam. I reveal this old science to you because you are my Bhakta. Bhakto Sime Saka, you are my friend. You are my friend and my devotee. So therefore, I reveal to you the mystery of this science, the science of the Bhagavad Gita, or the science of our relationship with God. So God is beyond our material senses. God cannot be seen with this material sense. So fool people, they ask, can you show me God? Yes, we can show anyone God. But does anyone have the eye to see God? So that is the question. Do people have eyes to see God? So because it's not just by having these eyes that we can see God. Actually, God is seen by the heart. You don't see God by our eyes, but by our heart. It says in the Brahma Samhita, Janshama Shunda Chincha Guna Swarupam, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sataiva Hridayashu. Hridayashu, Sada, those sadhus, those who are devotees, they can see God through their hearts. So even if one is blind, one has no material vision, one can see God. One can see God when his heart is into God. When he puts his heart, he surrenders his life, her life to God, and his heart is completely absorbed in thoughts of God. Then one can see God. So God can be seen by the heart, not by the eyes. So many people, they could see Krishna when he appeared 5,000 years ago. Duryodhana, he could see Krishna, but he could not realize Krishna. Kamsa could see Krishna, but he could not realize Krishna. So many kings, so many people, they saw Krishna, they could have association with Krishna, but actually they did not see Krishna. Because God is seen only by devotion. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena santa sadeva hridayeshu vilokayanti janshyama sundra chincha guna swarupam govinda ajipurushantamaham bhajami. God is seen only by those who have their eyes anointed with prema, with devotion, with love of God. For them, these sadhus, they can see Krishna in their hearts. So because the sense, material sense, we cannot see God. As it says here, He is adoxaja. He's beyond sense perception. Prabhupada says, because Vidura was always absorbed in thought of the Lord, Maitreya could estimate Vidura's transcendental value. So you can estimate someone quality, value, by seeing how much that person is God conscious. That's the way to measure a person, to measure a spiritual master. Actually, you cannot measure a spiritual master. A spiritual master is always absorbed in God consciousness. But you can see who is a spiritual master, because the spiritual master is 100% absorbed in God consciousness, in Krishna consciousness. As Rupa Goswāmī explains, that a devotee of the Lord, he cannot misuse any second in the service of the Lord. Actually, one can measure one's advancement in God consciousness by how much one's laments when 1 second is lost in Krishna consciousness. When he sleeps too much, when he talks unnecessary things, when he acts in a certain way that's not God conscious. So like ourselves, we common people, they are so attached to so many things in this material world. We use our senses, our time, our body for material things. But a spiritual master, a advanced Vaishnava, advanced devotee, he is always absorbed in God consciousness. He's always thinking about God all the time, always thinking on me, Krishna says. Think on me, become my devotee, worship me. So this is Krishna consciousness. So when Maitreya, he could estimate Vidura's transcendental value, because Vidura was completely absorbed in God consciousness, in Krishna consciousness. So this is the way to measure even ourselves. Are we making advancement in Krishna consciousness? How much I'm God conscious? I'm 24/7 God conscious? I'm all the time thinking of God? Or do I like to act in this material platform, material sense enjoyment? In the Srimad Bhagavatam says, the sun, when it sets, so this diminishes the duration of life of a living entity. So when the sun sets, we are losing one more day. And that day, was it busy in Krishna consciousness? Were we busy, occupied in God consciousness? So this is the consideration. And Maitreya could see. Maitreya could see the value of Vidura, because Vidura was absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Prabhupada says, he appreciated the valuable increase of Vidura and thus thanked him with great honor. Because as the verse says here, Maitreya Vacha. Vidura, Maitreya said, O Vidura, all glory unto you. You have inquired from me of the greatest of all goodness, and thus you have shown your mercy both to the world and to me. Because Vidura was asking about transcendence. And Vidura was showing mercy to the world, to us, because you are hearing Śrīmad Bhagavatam. And Maitreya said, you are showing your mercy towards me. Because when you ask me about Krishna, I can remember Krishna. When you ask me about transcendence, I can be focused in transcendence. So for this reason, devotees, they are always engaged in Krishna consciousness, in asking each other, in talking about Krishna. Machita magata pranabodayanta parasparam. That my devotee, his life is completely devoted to me. They are enlivening each other by talking about me, by discussing about me. So when Krishna is in the center of our lives, then we make advancement, we make progress in spiritual life. So therefore, to hear Śrīmad Bhagavatam and to speak Śrīmad Bhagavatam is the greatest welfare for all. But there is no superior knowledge than Śrīmad Bhagavatam. This is a knowledge that surpasses all kinds of religion. Dharma prajita kaitravo taram. Dharma prajita kaitravo tra. This Śrīmad Bhagavatam rejects all materially all material religion. So this is the Śrīmad Bhagavatam. So let me read again the verse, and you're going to stop it here. Maitreya Vacha sadhu pṛṣṭaḥ tvaya sadhu lokam sadhu anukrinata kirtim vitam vata loke atmano doksajatmanaha. Shri Maitreya said, O Vidura, all glory to you, you have inquired from me of the greatest of all goodness, and thus you have shown your mercy both to the world and to me, because your mind is always absorbed in thoughts of the transcendence. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. If you have any question, just write down at the comment box and you answer you. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada.